Throughout its history, Mont Orgueil has experienced a lot of change. One period of change that was quite extensive was during the Tudor monarchs, which is the 16th century. The reason why Mont Orgueil had to change so extensively was because cannons were now being used much more in siege warfare. So now previously impregnable castles, like this one, were now under threat from cannons, especially out on the West Hill. Now I'm going to go through several places that were changed and explain to you how they were made to adapt to the new form of warfare. One change that was made was that the former outer wall was moved so to narrow this entrance. The reason why it was narrowed was because if the enemy had breached the wall, they then would have been funneled into a killing zone in which the defenders above would have been able to fire down on them. This wall here actually formed a D-shaped bastion which was attached to the now narrow outer wall, and it would have had cannon on top of it which would have protected the harbour of Gardien from enemy ships. This D-shaped bastion is known as the Cornish bastion, and it was commissioned by Sir Henry Cornish. You can actually see his coat of arms just there. The bastion itself is actually made out of reclaimed masonry from the old Priory of St Helier. Now, the cannon that's fixed in it would have fired grape shot into the lower ward had enemies breached the wall here. The medieval keep has now been enlarged, as it was originally just a rectangular shape at the far end of the cliff. It has now been enlarged into a D-shaped bastion. The D shape is so the walls that are now curved can easily deflect cannon fire which will be fired from the west. The keep is called the Somerset Mount and is named after the Duke of Somerset, who was the governor of Jersey during the period. The keep itself was now more of a residential area of the castle, and the governor and his family would have resided inside the keep. So that is why there had to be more rooms to be built in order to hold the governor, his family, and their servants. At the base of the Somerset Mount are two niches that are carved into the actual structure. The reason for this was so that they could house cannon which would fire into the Bay of Grouville. Protecting the Somerset Mount to the west would have been an L-shaped battery which we call the Grand Battery. Now the Grand Battery was built over the old medieval wall and would have had a raised platform in order to contain a large amount of cannons. The reason why this battery was built was because of the hill just behind me, which is called Mont Saint-Nicolas. Now Mont Saint-Nicolas in the medieval period was not much of a problem because the siege engines the enemy would have possessed wouldn't have been able to fire from that hill into the castle. However, with the introduction of cannons, this hill became a massive vulnerability to the castle. So it was imperative that this bastion had enough cannons to fire against the enemy, making their stay on the hill very uncomfortable. On the top of the Somerset Mount, there would have been many cannons like this one, which is a saker, and they would have been positioned to fire against any potential enemies to the north, the west, and the south of the castle. The platform is actually made out of reclaimed Catholic altar slabs, which suggests that the top of the castle was built during the Reformation or after the Reformation, as many monasteries have been closed down in the Kingdom of England. The lead roof is actually made from materials from Glastonbury Abbey in Somerset. Despite all the renovations that were made to Mont Orgueil, it was decided that this castle was just not suitable for the new era of warfare. The main issue with this castle was that the eastern walls, which is the seaward facing walls, had been deliberately made thin when it was constructed. This was a common practice in the medieval period, and this was because an enemy would never attack from the sea because it did not have the technology to do so. However, in the 1600s, now that cannons are more common on the battlefield, this meant that ships which had large cannon could now pulverise the eastern side of Mont Orgueil. It was decided that a new castle should be built in order to defend the island in this new age of cannons and gunpowder. This fortress would become Elizabeth Castle and is situated just south of the town of St Helier and would defend Jersey for the next 200 years.